Imagine you're sitting at a final table. The tension in the room is it's thick enough to cut with a knife. You reach out, your fingers touch the top card of your deck, and you draw.
The moment of truth.
Right. And it is the ultimate winning card, the exact perfect piece of the puzzle you need to pull off this flawless victory. You can literally see the whole sequence playing out in your mind.
Oh, I know that feeling so well.
But before you can even slide that card onto the table, the game engine just freezes. It looks at the other cards in your hand, flashes a warning, and forces you to throw your winning ticket straight into the trash.
It's an incredibly visceral feeling of loss. You have the tools, right? But the underlying systems simply refuse to let you hold them all at once.
And usually, when we talk about the boundaries of a game, we expect them to be visible. Like, you look at a basketball court, you see the thick painted lines on the hardwood.
Exactly. Step over the line, the whistle blows, you're out of bounds.
Yeah, the restriction is this physical reality that everyone can see and agree upon. But when you step into the world of tabletop and trading card game design, those painted lines they disappear.
They really do. They aren't on the board at all.
No, they're buried deep in the rule book, and often you don't even realize they're dictating your every single move until you just slam headfirst into them.
Which is exactly why today we were examining a massive stack of rule books, system analyses, and literally thousands of pages of intense player discussions.
We're looking at some of the most popular games in existence, right?
Yeah. Magic, The Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Gloomhaven, Ark Nova, Dominion, and even a few others.
Because our mission today for this deep dive is to uncover a very specific, almost entirely invisible piece of game architecture. We're going deep on the hand size limit.
Right.
Now, I know what you listening might be thinking. A hand limit sounds like just the most boring administrative bookkeeping rule imaginable. Like, oh, I have too many cards. The rules say I have to throw it away. Yawn.
It sounds so mundane on the surface.
It does. But what we're going to reveal today is how this single constraint, forcing players to discard their options, secretly dictates the entire pacing of a game.
It throttles power, it completely warps player psychology, and it manufactures the exact tension that makes these systems engaging in the first place.
Yeah.
For you listening, we're going to trace how different game engines categorize and enforce these invisible boundaries. We'll start with the classic end-of-term cleanup phases.
And classics. Yeah.
Right, and then move into the bizarre digital glitches that occur when you try to actually code these limits. We'll explore shared administrative breaks that turn into political weapons, and even look at games where the cards in your hand represent your character's literal physical heartbeat.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to start with the foundational archetype. If we're looking at how games enforce order, we basically have to look at what happens when players inevitably figure out how to break that order.
Which they always do.
Always. Let's look at what our system analysis sources call periodic end-of-turn enforcement.
Yeah, and the grandfather of this system is Magic, The Gathering. To understand how restrictive a hand limit can be, we need to open up the game's comprehensive rules manual.
Which is, let's be honest, a massive, incredibly dense legal document at this point.
It really is. It reads like a tax code. But we need to look specifically at the cleanup step. This is the absolute final phase of a player's turn.
Okay.
Under Rules 514.1 and 514.2, this highly specific sequence of automated turn-based actions occurs. First, the active player checks their hand size.
Right.
If they hold more than their maximum allowed, which is normally 7 cards, they are forced to discard down to that exact number.
Just to clarify the boundaries here for the listener,
Yeah.
This enforcement only triggers on your turn, correct?
That's right.
Like if we're playing and it's my turn, and you somehow manage to draw 15 cards through some, I don't know, defensive spell,
Right, on your turn.
you aren't forced to discard anything right then, right? You just get to sit there holding a massive hand until your own turn eventually ends.
That is a crucial distinction. The game only polices your hand size when you are the active player trying to pass the turn back to your opponent.
Okay, got it. It's like having to clean your room before you're allowed to go to sleep.
Exactly. So, you check your cards, you discard down to 7, then simultaneously the game engine performs a scrub of the entire board state.
A scrub.
Yeah, all marked damage is removed from creatures, and any lingering effects that say until end of turn instantly expire. But the most important mechanical detail of this cleanup step is that these actions do not use the stack.
Which means the waiting room is closed.
Exactly.
Because the stack is that conceptual space where players can respond to each other's actions, like You cast a spell, I get a chance to counter it before it actually happens.
Right, it's the core interaction mechanic of the game.
But you're saying that during this cleanup phase, nobody gets to do anything. The game just takes over and sweeps the floor.
Ordinarily, yes. No player receives priority during the cleanup step. You cannot cast instant spells. You cannot activate abilities. The game is operating in a purely administrative capacity. It is closing the books on the turn.
But wait, if the game is forcing me to discard a card into my graveyard, and I happen to have a card on the board that triggers an effect whenever something goes to the graveyard, what happens? Does the game just ignore it because, like you said, the waiting room is closed?
This is where the architecture of Magic gets incredibly intricate, because it is a game fundamentally built on exceptions. Rule 514.3AA specifically addresses this conflict.
Of course there's a specific subrule for it.
There always is. So if the automated act of cleaning up, like discarding down to 7 triggers an ability, the game physically halts the cleanup process, the stack is forced back open, and the active player is granted priority once again.
So the administrative phase is just completely interrupted. The turn wakes back up.
The turn is fully alive again. Say you're forced to discard a card with the madness mechanic, like Fiery Temper.
Oh.
Discarding that card triggers its own ability, allowing you to cast it for an alternate cost. Or perhaps you have an enchantment like Necropotence in play, which states that whenever you discard a card, you must exile it from your graveyard.
So the game has to deal with that right then.
Yes. The moment one of those triggers fires, both players can suddenly cast spells, respond to the triggers, and interact with the board state just like they could during the main phase.
That sounds incredibly messy. I mean, once everyone is done casting spells and responding to this sudden burst of activity, how does the turn actually end? You can't just leave things hanging in this weird limbo.
You don't. Once the stack is finally empty and both players agree to pass priority, the game does not just move to the next player's turn.
What does it do?
It initiates a completely brand new cleanup step from scratch.
Wait, it starts over.
It runs the entire checklist again. Do you have more than 7 cards? Is there new damage to remove?
Wow. And here is where the player community has completely weaponized this rule. There's this notorious strategy we found in the sources revolving around a card called the Gitrog monster.
Oh, the Gitrog loop. Yes.
Its text is deceptively simple, right?
Yeah.
It says, whenever one or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you draw a card. So let's walk through the hypothetical scenario here just to show how wild this gets.
Let's do it.
We're in a tournament. It's my cleanup step. I have 8 cards in my hand, meaning I'm legally obligated by Rule 514.1 to discard 1.
So you review your hand and you choose to discard a land card to get down to your legal limit of 7.
But the moment that land hits the graveyard, the Gitrog monster sees it. The game engine tries to close the turn, but Rule 514.3a screams, wait, we have a trigger.
Right, the stack violently opens back up.
The monster's ability goes on the stack. Assuming you have no response, the ability resolves. Draw a card.
Leaving you, once again, with exactly 8 cards in your hand.
And since the stack is now empty, the game initiates a brand new cleanup step. It checks my hand, sees 8 cards, and says, you are over the limit. Discard 1.
And if you discard another land...
I draw another card. I can manually force the game to loop this sequence over and over. I'm trapped in, or rather, I guess I'm exploiting, a recursive loop of endless administrative cleanups.
It's brilliant, really.
I am using the very rule designed to stop me from hoarding cards as an engine to churn through my entire deck until I find the exact combination I want.
It perfectly illustrates the danger of periodic enforcement. When a game dictates a specific window for checking constraints, players will invariably try to stretch that window, pack it with actions, or trap the game inside it.
Yeah, humans are so good at finding the loopholes.
We see a parallel, perhaps even more extreme version of this in Yu-Gi-Oh! In that system, the default hand limit is 6, and it is checked during the end phase.
Which, if you follow high-level Yu-Gi-Oh! Play, the end phase isn't really an end at all.
No, not at all.
It functions almost like a secondary main phase. The amount of tactical maneuvering that happens in that window is just staggering.
It is arguably one of the most complex phases in modern trading card games. Much like the Magic rules we just discussed, if a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player discards down to 6, and one of those discarded cards possesses a graveyard trigger, it initiates a chain.
And just to translate the terminology for a moment for our listeners, a chain in Yu-Gi-Oh! Operates on a similar philosophical principle to the stack in Magic. It's the sequence of resolving activated effects.
Exactly. You might discard a card like Dandelion, which automatically summons creature tokens when it hits the graveyard. Or the white stone of legend, which triggers to add a specific dragon card to your hand.
Okay, yeah.
The moment that discard happens, the chain is built, effects resolve, and the game state shifts dramatically.
But the Yu-Gi-Oh card pool has some incredibly explosive enablers that take this to a whole other level. Take a quick play spell card like Super Rejuvenation.
Oh, that card is infamous.
Right. The text allows you to draw a card during the end phase for every dragon-type monster you discarded or tributed that entire turn.
Which is wild.
So picture the sequence. You hit the end phase holding 8 cards. You throw away 2 dragons to satisfy the limit of 6.
But those discards create a window of opportunity. You activate Super Rejuvenation, citing the 2 dragons you just discarded as your fuel.
Yeah.
The spell resolves, and you immediately draw 2 fresh cards.
Putting you right back at 8 cards. The game recognizes you're still in the end phase, you're still over the limit of 6, and it forces you to discard again.
Exactly. You keep building these chains, drawing and discarding, generating massive amounts of advantage while technically operating inside the phase that is supposed to be turning the game off.
Think about the underlying psychology of what is happening here for you listening.
Yeah.
The rules dictate you must close up shop for the night. You're trying to leave the office, so you send one final email to clear your inbox.
I love this analogy.
But that email triggers an automated response, which requires you to file a report, which alerts a manager who sends you 3 more emails.
Yes.
You are legally not allowed to leave the building until the inbox is empty, but the very act of emptying it generates more work. That is the reality of periodic enforcement. You are fighting the system's own bureaucracy.
That is a deeply anxiety-inducing scenario for anyone who works in a corporate office.
Totally.
But it raises a fascinating counter question. If game designers have to build these incredibly fragile, exploitable rules infrastructures just to handle what happens when players have too many cards...
Right, why bother?
Exactly. What happens if a game just abandons the concept entirely? What if there is no limit? Let's transition from these strict bureaucratic enforcements to a system of absolute freedom.
Ooh, okay. Where are we going?
To explore that, we have to look at the physical Pokemon trading card game. For veterans of Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh!, this is often the most shocking rule to learn when they sit down at a Pokemon table.
What is it?
There is no maximum hand size limit. None at all.
I remember reading that in the source materials and thinking I had to have misunderstood it. 0 restrictions. You can just draw and draw until you are holding half your deck in your sweaty hands.
It is entirely legal. Mathematically, assuming you have 1 active Pokemon in play and 1 prize card remaining on the board, you could theoretically hold 58 cards in a single hand.
58 cards.
Yes. There is no end-of-turn phase that polices your hand size. The concept of discarding for space just does not exist.
And what blows my mind is that the designers don't just tolerate this. They actively design cards that weaponize that physical reality. Look at the Sun and Moon era of the game.
Oh, the Meowstic strategy.
Yes, there was a psychic Pokemon called Meowstic. It had an attack whose damage output scaled exponentially based on the sheer volume of cards in your hand.
Right.
If you were hoarding 20 or 30 cards, Meowstic was outputting apocalyptic levels of damage. The strategy of the game completely shifts. You aren't managing a tight budget of resources. You are acting like a dragon hoarding gold.
The more you hold, the more powerful you become.
Yeah.
It is a brilliant utilization of physical game space. However, the true friction emerged recently when the Pokemon Company adapted this experience for mobile devices with the app Pokemon TCG Pocket.
Right. Going digital changes everything.
It really does. When you move a game from a physical table to a digital screen, specifically a smartphone screen, you suddenly have interface limitations. You cannot visually represent a 58-card hand on a 6-inch piece of glass in a way that is actually playable.
So the developers were forced to implement a hand limit purely for user interface reasons. They capped it at exactly 10 cards.
Yes. And crucially, they did not implement this as a periodic end-of-turn check like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! They coded it as what our sources define as real-time enforcement.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
The digital engine is constantly, relentlessly checking your hand size every single millisecond. If you hit 10 cards, the system physically locks you out of acquiring more.
Which, I mean, sounds like a reasonable compromise for a digital app, right? Until you realize how translating a physical action into rigid code creates a literal paradox.
Yes, and this caused a massive uproar in the player community. Let's walk through the glitch, because it highlights exactly why digital adaptations struggle with physical rules.
Okay, paint the picture for us.
Imagine you are playing a match on the app. Your hand is what the community calls bricked.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
It's the worst. You have 10 completely unplayable cards. You have no energy to attach, no basic Pokemon to play. You are just trapped. Because you automatically draw a card at the start of every turn, your hand has slowly swollen to that absolute maximum of 10 cards.
Right. The game flashes a warning on the screen. Handful. Unable to draw cards. Which is fine, I get it. But then finally, I draw my saving grace. I draw a supporter card.
Right.
Something like Professor's Research or Parasol Lady. In the physical game, these are your emergency escape hatches.
Yeah.
The text literally says discard your hand and draw new cards. Or shuffle your hand into your deck and draw.
It is the exact tool designed to fix a bricked hand.
Exactly. So on my phone, I tap the supporter card, I drag it out of my hand and onto the digital playmat.
And the game engine aggressively rejects the action. It snaps the card back into your hand and refuses to let you play it.
I am literally staring at the screen screaming, why? The card says discard my hand. It is fixing the problem.
The rejection happens because of the rigid order of digital operations. In a physical game, a human brain processes the sequence organically. I declare I am playing this card, it moves to the discard pile, my hand is now empty, I draw the new cards.
Right, because we understand context.
The human understands intent. The computer code does not. The digital engine runs a strict pre-flight check before it allows the card to resolve.
So what is the code actually looking at during that check?
The engine reads the command. If this card resolves, the player will be instructed to draw cards. It then checks the current game state. The player currently holds 10 cards.
Okay.
But here is the fatal flaw. It includes the supporter card itself in that calculation because the card has not yet officially resolved and moved to the discard pile. The engine sees a full hand, sees a command that will add cards to a full hand, and instantly cancels the entire action to prevent you from violating the 10-card limit.
It is a complete logic loop. To play the card that draws cards, you need empty space in your hand. But the card that creates the empty space is currently occupying the exact space you need to execute the command.
It inadvertently punishes the players who are already losing. If you suffered from bad draw luck and your hand filled up with useless cards, the game's architecture traps you in a coded prism. You cannot even play the card designed to save you.
That is so frustrating.
It really highlights how a hand limit is not just a rule, but a physical physics engine. When you change the physics from analog to digital, the entire tactical reality of the game shatters.
It's like walking into a store to buy a new wallet because yours is too small. But the cashier refuses to sell you the new wallet because your current wallet is too full of cash to hold a receipt for the transaction.
That analogy perfectly captures the absurdity of the bottleneck.
You're just stuck standing there with your money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, so far, we have been discussing hand sizes as a representation of options. Your cards are the spells you can cast, the monsters you can summon, the resources you can spend.
Right.
But what if a game designer fundamentally shifted that metaphor? What if your hand size wasn't your inventory, but your actual physical heartbeat?
Oh, this is where we're getting to the really tense stuff.
Yeah.
This brings us to a massive shift in genre, moving away from competitive dueling and into cooperative tactical survival.
Yes, let's delve into Gloomhaven. For those who haven't encountered it, Gloomhaven is a mammoth box. It is a cooperative dungeon crawler where you and your friends fight through fantasy scenarios.
But unlike traditional tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, where you have a character sheet and can theoretically swing your sword a million times as long as you have hit points, Gloomhaven's entire engine is driven by strict card management.
In Gloomhaven, your hand of cards is not just your list of abilities, it is quite literally your stamina.
The first time I sat down to play this, the restriction felt suffocating. You look at your starting character, say the Brute, and you are handed a starting hand of maybe 10 cards.
Right.
And the rules state clearly, you must play 2 cards every single turn. If you cannot play 2 cards, you are exhausted, you collapse, and you are removed from the scenario.
It creates a mathematical closed loop that functions as a relentless ticking clock. If you start with a hand limit of 9 cards and you are forced to play 2 every single turn, your lifespan is entirely predictable.
Right.
But the tension comes from how you recover those cards. When you play your 2 cards, they typically go into your discard pile. To retrieve them and continue fighting, your character must perform a rest cycle, either a short rest on the fly or a long rest which consumes your entire turn.
And this is where the game just twists the knife.
Yeah.
When you rest to pick up your discarded cards, You do not get them all back.
No, you don't.
You're required to choose one of those discarded cards and move it to the lost pile.
Mm.
It's permanently removed from the game for the remainder of that scenario.
Let us break down the exact mathematics of this exhaustion mechanic, because the design is ruthlessly elegant. Assume you have a starting hand of 9 cards.
Okay, 9 cards.
If you play with absolute conservatism, meaning you only use standard actions and never play the massive, powerful abilities that force a card into the lost pile immediately, you will survive for 4 turns. You have played 8 cards, you have 1 left in your hand.
Okay.
You are forced to rest. You retrieve your discard pile, but you permanently lose 1 card. You now have a total pool of 8 cards.
So your next cycle is inherently shorter. With 8 cards, I can only take 4 turns again, but this time I have 0 cards left over. I have to rest, lose another card, and now my total pool drops to 7.
Precisely. A pool of 7 cards means you only get 3 turns before resting. Then your pool drops to 6, which also yields 3 turns.
It just keeps accelerating.
If you extrapolate this math all the way down to exhaustion, a 9-card hand provides a maximum lifespan of exactly 20 rounds. If you are playing a class with a slightly larger hand size, like the Tinkerer who starts with 12 cards, the math stretches out to a maximum of 36 rounds.
It transforms the entire experience. It feels like you are running a desert marathon, and every step you take costs a specific, cherished memory. You know exactly how many memories you have left. Once the well runs dry, you just collapse in the sand. You are out.
And this mathematical reality causes a profound psychological shift in how players approach the game. Gloomhaven cards are split in half a top action and a bottom action.
Right.
Usually one half is a basic repeatable maneuver like moving 2 hexes or attacking for 2 damage, but the other half is often a spectacular cinematic ability, a massive fireball that engulfs an entire room, or a leap that crushes 3 enemies at once.
The fun stuff.
Exactly, the fun stuff. However, these flashy abilities carry a specific symbol. If you use them, the card bypasses the discard pile entirely and goes straight into the lost pile.
You are literally burning a piece of your soul to do something cool.
Exactly. And the cost is not just the loss of that specific ability. If you burn a card in your very first cycle when you had 9 cards, you didn't just lose 1 turn. You lost the ability to cycle that card through every subsequent rest for the entire scenario.
Oh, wow.
Burning a card early doesn't just subtract 1 from your total, it exponentially shortens your overall lifespan.
Which leads to the most agonizing tabletop decisions I have ever experienced. You are staring down a relatively weak goblin. You have this epic room-clearing attack in your hand.
But you really want to use it.
You really do. And you're sitting there agonizing. Is killing this goblin right now in round 2 worth dying 3 rounds earlier at the end of the dungeon when the boss shows up? It forces you to suppress your own power.
It demands an incredible amount of conservative discipline, although there is one specific class that completely subverts this mathematical dread. The Spellweaver.
Oh, the Spellweaver, the class that gives everyone heart palpitations.
The Spellweaver starts with an incredibly restrictive hand size of only 8 cards. Mathematically, an 8-card hand means an incredibly short lifespan. They should be exhausted before the dungeon is even half over.
They're essentially a glass cannon with a fuse that is already burned down to the nub.
But their entire design hinges on one specific card in their arsenal called Reviving Ether. Its ability is entirely unique in the game. It allows the Spellweaver to recover all of their lost cards and return them to their hand once per scenario.
It is a total system reboot. You get your soul back.
If executed perfectly, at the exact precipice of exhaustion, this single card alters their stamina math completely. It effectively grants an 8-card class the longevity of a character with a 10.5-card hand size.
That's a massive jump.
They can burn cards aggressively, rain destruction on the first few rooms, use Reviving Ether, and start all over again. But the mechanic introduces a terrifying vulnerability.
Because what if you lose Reviving Ether before you can play it? In Gloomhaven, if you take massive damage from an enemy, you can avoid losing hit points by choosing to randomly lose a card from your hand, or specifically losing 2 from your discard pile. The forums and Reddit threads we pulled for this research are absolutely littered with trauma stories about this exact scenario.
The anecdotes are painful to read. A player gets ambushed, they take a critical hit, they decide to randomly lose a card from their hand to survive, and they pull Reviving Ether.
And instantly, their character's lifespan is severed in half. They have no way to reboot. They just put her out and exhaust 3 rooms before the boss, while the rest of the table has to try and finish the dungeon without them.
It perfectly illustrates how a hand limit in Gloomhaven isn't an administrative rule, it is the core narrative tension. Your hand size is the story of your survival.
It really is.
But let's shift the perspective again. Gloomhaven provides a personal, highly predictable timer. You can do the math. But what happens if the timer forcing you to discard is entirely unpredictable?
Oh, this is terrible.
What if that timer is controlled by the other people sitting at the table with you?
This brings us to a board game that has absolutely dominated the hobby in recent years. Ark Nova. The theme is fantastic. You are building and managing a modern, scientifically supported zoo.
Right.
But mechanically, Ark Nova does away with the concept of formal, structured rounds where everyone takes a turn and then the board resets. Instead, it relies on a mechanic called the break phase.
In Ark Nova, the turn structure is fluid. Players simply take turns sequentially, one after another, in an endless loop.
Okay.
However, certain actions, most notably playing sponsors cards or drawing directly from the central deck, force a shared break token to advance down a specific track on the main board.
It's like a shared coffee break clock for the entire table. Every time you do certain tasks, the clock ticks closer to 5:40 p.m.
Precisely. And when that break token reaches the final space on its track, the flow of the game stops dead. Everything freezes. The game enters a mandatory administrative routine.
It's a coffee break.
Yes. Players collect their income based on their zoo's appeal. They wipe specific tokens off the board. And crucially for our discussion, every player must immediately discard down to their maximum hand limit.
And the cruelty of Ark Nova is that your starting hand limit is absurdly tiny. It is exactly 3 cards.
It is an incredibly tight constraint. You are constantly drawing these beautifully illustrated animal cards. Massive elephants, rhinos, eagles, specialized primates.
Right, you want to play them all.
But these cards cannot simply be played. They require complex, interconnected conditions. You might need a massive size 5 enclosure build, or a partnership with a zoo in Africa, or a specific level of scientific reputation before the game allows you to play the animal.
So you are naturally incentivized to hoard them. You draw a fantastic eagle and you think, okay, I don't have a bird aviary yet, but I will build one in 2 turns and then I can play this eagle. You are trying to assemble these intricate combo pieces in your hand.
But you only have the capacity to hold 3 cards. If you are holding the eagle, a primate, and a sponsor card you need for later, your hand is completely gridlocked.
You're stuck.
And here is where the strategic tension reaches its peak. The timing of the break is dynamic, and it is largely controlled by the players.
Which means if I am sitting there with 5 amazing cards in my hand, desperately hoping the break doesn't happen so I can spend my next 2 turns playing them and getting under the limit of 3, my opponent can see that.
Oh, they definitely see it.
My opponent can look at my bulging hand, look at the break track, and realize what is happening.
And they will absolutely weaponize that knowledge. An observant opponent can intentionally take a suboptimal action simply because it moves the break token over the edge.
That's so mean.
They force the break to trigger right before your turn. The game pauses, the administrative phase kicks in, and you are forced to discard those perfectly crafted combo pieces straight into the trash.
It is so devastating. You spend 20 minutes planning this perfect sequence for your zoo, and your friend just smirks, plays a meaningless sponsor card, and forces you to throw your prized eagle into the dumpster.
It's heartbreaking.
It feels so aggressively mean, but it's brilliant design because they didn't actually attack you.
It is a masterclass in indirect aggression. They are simply manipulating the shared administrative clock. Because this threat is so pervasive, one of the most critical early game priorities in Ark Nova is upgrading your association action card.
What does that do?
When you upgrade this specific card to level 5, you receive a permanent boost to your zoo's reputation, but more importantly, you permanently upgrade your personal hand limit from 3 to 5.
It buys you breathing room. It physically expands the waiting room for your zoo animals so they don't get thrown out when the coffee break alarm rings.
Yes, exactly.
You are spending precious early game resources not to score points, but simply to buy protection from the table's shared timer.
Exactly. It shows how a shared administrative pause creates fierce player interaction without ever requiring combat mechanics. Now, we've explored periodic discards, digital glitches, personal timers, and shared breaks. Let us push this concept to the absolute extremes.
Okay, I'm ready.
I want to look at a game that forces you to throw everything away and contrast it with a game that refuses to let you hold an extra card for even a single second.
Let's do it. Let's talk about total velocity.
Yeah.
We're looking at Dominion. For context, for those listening, Dominion is the game that practically invented the modern deck-building genre.
It's an absolute classic.
And in Dominion, your hand limit isn't something you carefully trim down to. Your hand limit is a mandate for total destruction. At the end of every single turn, regardless of what you played, regardless of what you decided to hold back, you must discard your entire hand. Every single card goes to the discard pile.
You wipe the slate completely clean, and then you immediately draw a fresh hand of 5 cards for your next turn.
When you introduce Dominion to someone who comes from a background of Magic or Pokemon, they absolutely despise this rule at first. It feels so punitive.
It goes against all their instincts.
They will draw a hand that has 2 amazing combo cards, but they are missing the third piece to make it work. Their instinct is to say, I'll just pass my turn, I'll hold on to these 2 cards, and I'll hope I draw the third piece next turn.
But the game's architecture absolutely forbids it.
The game says, no, throw them in the trash, start over. It feels like the game is punishing you for bad luck. Why would a designer force such a brutal, total deck-clearing mechanic? What is the game theory justification for this?
It serves 2 absolutely vital system purposes that make the deck-building genre function. First, as you noted, it aggressively prevents combo hoarding.
Right.
If unplayed cards could be retained, a player could just sit there, passing their turn, doing nothing, passively assembling an unstoppable hand of perfect cards.
It would be so boring.
The game would devolve into a staring contest. If you want to execute a massive, explosive turn in Dominion, you have to earn it by building an engine. You have to buy cards that draw other cards, chaining them together dynamically in real time during a single turn.
You can't just wait patiently for the combo. You have to construct a machine that digs for the combo.
Precisely. The second reason is early game balance. The ultimate goal in Dominion is to purchase victory cards. The most valuable standard victory card is a province, which costs 8 coins.
Okay, 8 coins.
Every player starts the game with a deck composed mostly of copper cards, which generate 1 coin each. If the game allowed you to save cards across turns, the optimal strategy would be trivial.
Oh, I see it. You would just draw 5 coppers, save them in your hand, wait for your next turn, draw 3 more coppers, and instantly buy a province on turn 2.
The game would break entirely. By forcing a complete and total discard, the game enforces what designers call engine velocity.
Engine velocity.
You are forced to cycle through your deck rapidly. When you buy a new card, it goes to your discard pile. Because you are throwing away 5 cards every turn, your deck empties quickly, forcing a shuffle, which means you get to see and play that new card you just bought much faster.
It tightens the feedback loop of your strategic choices.
Exactly. It makes the game move.
So Dominion makes you throw everything away to force you to move faster and build better engines. But let's pivot to the opposite extreme. Let's look at a cooperative game that enforces limits with a terrifying strictness. Let's talk about Pandemic.
Pandemic. In Pandemic, players represent a team of CDC specialists traveling the globe, trying to cure 4 distinct diseases before they overwhelm humanity.
The hand limit for every player is 7 cards. But unlike Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh!, where the game waits until the end of the turn to check your math, Pandemic uses immediate real-time enforcement.
The literal millisecond you receive an 8th card, the game hits the pause button.
Exactly. You are strictly, unequivocally prohibited from holding more than 7 cards at any given moment.
Yeah.
If you draw an 8th card, the entire game state freezes.
Right.
You must immediately choose a card to discard, or choose to play an event card to get your hand back down to 7 before any other action by you or any other player can occur.
Which sounds simple enough on paper, but in practice, it creates this incredibly restrictive choke point on cooperative sharing.
It really does.
In Pandemic, the main way you cure a disease is by collecting 5 cards of the same color. Usually, you have to trade cards with your teammates to assemble those sets, but the trading rules are already strict. You have to be in the same city to trade a card.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting at 7 cards and you try to hand me the crucial blue card we desperately need to cure the disease.
The moment that blue card touches your hand, you're at 8. The game pauses. You must immediately throw something else away. You are forced into this agonizing triage where accepting help means sacrificing another vital resource.
And the strictness of this rule is really highlighted by a specific rule that was introduced in the On the Brink expansion, The Archivist.
Oh, I love The Archivist.
The Archivist is a fascinating case study in rule clarification. Their special ability is that for one action, they can retrieve a city card directly from the discard pile. They can pull vital resources out of the trash.
Which, if you think about it strategically, sounds like an amazing loophole. If I am playing a game with you, and you are the archivist, I should just voluntarily dump all my good cards into the discard pile.
Right. Why not?
I could say, hey, I don't want to spend 3 actions walking over to you to trade. I'm just going to throw this blue card in the trash, and you can pick it up on your turn. Like passing the basketball via the garbage can.
It sounds like a brilliant tactical shortcut, but the rule book aggressively forbids it.
Does it?
Yes. To balance the power of the archivist, players are strictly prohibited from voluntarily discarding cards. You cannot simply dump cards to feed the discard pile for a teammate.
Wait, really? The game refuses to let you throw things away on purpose?
You can only discard a card if you are mathematically forced to by the 7-card limit, or if you are spending that card as an action to take a chartered flight to a city.
That is incredibly strict.
Yeah.
You aren't allowed to be sloppy with your resources just because your teammate is good at digging through the trash.
For the listener, think about this as forced tactical efficiency. The game architecture does not allow you to bypass the action economy. You cannot drop items on the floor for your teammate to pick up later.
Wow.
The discard pile is treated as a managed consequence, not a strategic storage box. Every single card transfer must be painfully negotiated within the strict confines of that 7-card limit and the geographic constraints of the board.
Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of ground. We've seen how rules constrain players. We've seen them act as exploitable bureaucratic loops, as digital paradoxes, as terrifying survival timers, and as enforcers of velocity.
It's a lot to process.
It is. To close out our deep dives today, I want to ask one final question of the systems we're looking at. How do game designers allow players to take these very constraints, these administrative shackles, and actively weaponize them against their opponents?
That's the best part. To see that in action, we should look at a fantastic recent example in the trading card space. Star Wars Unlimited.
Okay, Star Wars.
This game takes the traditional concept of the end-of-round discard and completely inverts its economic purpose.
In Star Wars Unlimited, at the end of every round, both players enter what is called the regroup phase. Players automatically draw 2 cards. But you don't just check a hand limit and throw your excess cards into a useless discard pile where they do nothing.
Instead, during the regroup phase, you are given a choice. You can choose to place 1 card from your hand face down in your resource area.
Right.
It permanently becomes an energy source, functionally identical to a land in Magic, which you use to pay for future cards. You aren't just discarding to meet a limit, you are actively building an economy out of your excess options.
It completely removes the feel-bad moment of being forced to discard. Throwing a card away doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like an investment. It makes you stronger for the next round.
Exactly.
But the game goes even deeper than that. There are cards that literally turn the physical act of discarding into an offensive strike.
A perfect example is the card Miggs Mayfeld. When he is on the board, he possesses an ability that triggers whenever you discard a card from your hand.
Okay, what does he do?
When you discard, he automatically deals damage to an enemy unit or directly to the enemy base.
So you are taking a purely administrative action, managing your hand size, or perhaps paying an alternate cost for a card, and the game allows you to turn that bookkeeping into a sniper shot.
Ooh.
Boom. Discard a card, deal damage. It transforms a chore into a highly tactical weapon.
And the underlying rule system supports this kind of clean interaction beautifully. For example, the game states that if you defeat an enemy unit, any upgrade cards attached to it are simultaneously defeated and discarded.
Keeping it clean.
This keeps the board state incredibly clean and ensures that secondary triggers, like Mayfield's, resolve clearly without cluttering the game's architecture.
But if we want to talk about weaponizing the architecture, we have to jump back to Yu-Gi-Oh! For a second. If anyone knows how to warp the rules of reality, it's the designers of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Oh, without a doubt.
We established earlier that the hard limit is 6, but there are cards that just look at the rulebook and laugh.
Yes. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a long history of printing cards that directly modify the core parameters of the game engine itself. Take a spell card like hieroglyph lithograph.
Okay.
Its effect allows you to pay 1,000 of your own life points to permanently raise your personal hand size limit to 7 for the rest of the game.
You are literally paying blood magic to expand your brain capacity.
You really are. And then you have infinite cards, a continuous spell that simply deletes the hand limit entirely for both players.
Which is just chaos.
Complete chaos. This is the mechanical enabler for some of the most legendary anime-style moments in the game's history. It allows a player to scale the attack power of a monster like Slifer the Sky Dragon, whose power relies entirely on your hand sized to infinity by holding 20 or 30 cards in your hand.
But what if I don't want to buff myself? What if I look at my opponent and I want to use the hand limit to choke them out? Can I weaponize the rulebook against them?
Absolutely. The game offers a suite of cards designed specifically for resource suffocation. Enervating Mist is a trap card that actively lowers your opponent's hand limit to 5.
Oh, that's annoying.
And Finite Cards is a spell that restricts both players' limits to 3.
And Finite Cards was specifically designed to block players from winning with Exodia. For context for the listeners, Exodia is a famous alternate win condition that requires you to hold 5 specific pieces in your hand at the exact same time. If Finite Cards lowers the limit to 3, you mathematically can never hold all 5 pieces at the end of your turn. You are forced to discard the pieces. You are using the rulebook to suffocate their win condition.
It's brilliant. And perhaps the most insidious weaponization of this mechanic is a card called Silent Wubby.
Silent Wubby.
This is a monster card that you play from your hand, but you summon it onto your opponent's side of the field. You give them control of it.
Okay, why would I do that?
Because its continuous effect states that its controller's hand limit becomes exactly 3.
You're handing them a Trojan horse. It sits on their side of the board, pretending to be a monster, but its real job is to actively restrict their ability to retain resources. That is beautifully toxic game design. I love the creativity of it.
It is a phenomenal manipulation of the game's physics. But there is one more game we must examine to see the ultimate weaponization of a hand limit. A fascinating dueling game called Sakura Arms.
Let's talk about Sakura Arms, because this game introduces a concept that feels almost like psychological warfare.
In Sakura Arms, players engage in a very tight, highly tactical duel. During the end phase, the game grants players an unusual amount of flexibility. You are actually permitted to discard down to a limit of your choosing. You can hold 0, 1, or 2 cards.
Which, on the surface, sounds fantastic. I have complete agency over my hand size.
Yeah.
If I want to hold 2 cards for defense, I can. If I want to pitch everything to draw fresh, I can.
You have control until your opponent employs a poison strategy.
A poison strategy.
Certain characters in Sakura Arms can insert poison cards directly into your hand. These cards are completely useless to you. But the critical, devastating rule of a poison card is that it cannot be discarded during the end phase.
Wait, it just sits there.
It remains glued to your hand.
But if I choose a hand limit of 2, and I have 2 poison cards in my hand,
Then your hand is entirely occupied by useless garbage. The poison cards artificially clog your hand limit for the remainder of the game or until you take massive, inefficient actions to clear them.
that's horrifying.
You are completely paralyzed by an administrative rule you can no longer satisfy with useful resources.
It is the ultimate weaponization of a game's architecture. You aren't attacking their hit points. You aren't destroying their monsters. You are directly attacking their ability to interact with the game itself. You are filling their physical inventory slots with concrete.
It perfectly highlights how deeply intertwined the administrative rules and the tactical strategy become in a well-designed game. The hand limit is not a boundary, it is a battlefield.
Okay, let's take a collective breath. We have covered a truly massive amount of ground today. For everyone listening, we have gone on a deep dive through the invisible architecture of tabletop game design.
We really have.
We started with the rigid, highly bureaucratic, yet surprisingly exploitable recursive cleanup loops of Magic. The Gathering in Yu-Gi-Oh!
We observed the paradoxical breakdown that occurs when digital code clashes with analog freedom in the glitches of Pokemon TCG Pocket.
We felt the mathematical dread and literal life-draining anxiety of Gloomhaven's 9-card exhaustion marathon, and we explored the table-flipping political tension of Arc Nova's shared break timer.
We analyzed the forced engine velocity of Dominion, the strict cooperative discipline of Pandemic, and finally how games like Star Wars, Unlimited, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Sakura Arms allow players to turn the administrative discard phase into a highly tactical weapon.
So we always ask the same question at the end of the show. What does this all mean? Why did we just spend an hour meticulously dissecting the rules for throwing pieces of cardboard away?
I believe there is a much broader philosophical reflection here, one that applies these highly specific game mechanics directly to how we manage our own lives.
Okay, how so?
We currently live in an age of intense, unrelenting information overload. We are all constantly holding on to mental cart emails we haven't replied to, endless scrolling feeds, to-do lists that stretch for pages, anxieties about the future, half-finished projects.
Our mental hand size is just constantly ballooning. We are operating like a player in the physical Pokemon game, just clutching 58 mental cards to our chest, exhausted, trying desperately to make sense of them all.
Exactly. And what all of these game systems teach us is that unlimited options without an underlying structure of enforcement inevitably lead to broken, paralyzed states.
Like the Pokemon glitch.
Yes. The digital glitch in Pokemon Pocket occurs precisely because the system cannot process the sheer volume of unfiltered input. In our own lives, perhaps we need to view constraints differently.
Right.
Having a strict mental hand limit, a forced, non-negotiable mechanic where we make ourselves discard tasks, worries, or obligations at the end of the day, isn't actually a restriction of our freedom.
It's a cleanup step.
It is. It is the very mechanic required to keep our personal engines running smoothly. Dominion forces you to discard your entire hand so that you can draw fresh new ideas tomorrow.
Yeah.
Gloomhaven teaches us that every single action costs precious energy, and we must choose what we burn our stamina on with incredible care.
Because if we don't implement a cleanup step, the invisible architecture of our daily lives just collapses under the weight of holding on to everything.
So, the provocative final thought we want to leave you with today, take a moment to look at your own mental hand of cards. You only have so much capacity before the system glitches and locks you out.
That's so true.
What are you holding in your hand right now that you need to discard, just so you can finally end your turn, rest, and draw a fresh hand tomorrow?